Usually when we talk about a map, there is this this expectation of order, like geometry.
Right. Pick safe.
Yeah, exactly. You look at a piece of parchment and you see the jagged little lines for mountains and, the squiggles for rivers, the neat little dots for cities. And you just point and say, well, there it is. That's the world.
It's fixed, contained, comforting, really. I mean, we like the world to be visible, to be categorized into borders and boundaries. It gives us a sense of control over our environment.
But when you step into the reality of Terry Goodkind's Faith of the Fallen, those boundaries have just, they've physically and magically collapsed.
Completely.
Emperor Jaging's armies are literally flooding the map, and we are looking at a geopolitical landscape that is just terrifyingly chaotic.
It's a mess.
So today, we're unpacking extensive excerpts from this epic to see how deeply held beliefs, whether rooted in radical individual liberty or this extreme, enforced self-sacrifice, how they can literally shape the destiny of entire nations.
Now, quick heads up before we dive in, this text deals in absolutes.
Yeah, heavy absolutes.
It really does. It features a fierce objectivist philosophy going head-to-head with militant collectivism, wealth-shaming, forced altruism.
A lot of heavy political themes.
Exactly. And we aren't here to pick sides or tell you which ideology is right. Our job today in this deep dive is to put these philosophies under the microscope exactly as the author presents them.
Right, impartially.
Yeah, and just see how they drive the warfare, the magic, and honestly, the sheer human suffering in this world.
Let's get a geographic grounding first, just to orient you, because the scale of this conflict is massive.
Oh, it's global.
Looking at the provided map, we have this vast historical division. On one side, there's the New World. It was made up of Westland, the Midlands, and Dahara. And on the other side, the Old World.
Separated for thousands of years by impassable magical barriers.
Right, but those boundaries have completely fallen. Emperor Jaging and his Imperial Order have flooded out of the Old World, breached the New World, and they've already occupied a major super wealthy nation in the Midlands called Anderith.
We're talking tens of thousands of troops. Magical warfare, the systematic dismantling of whole cultures.
The macrogeography is sweeping. But what's so compelling about this text is it doesn't linger in a grand war room with generals pushing wooden blocks across a map.
No, it shifts immediately.
Yeah, it transitions from that macro level of global conquest all the way down to the raw, painful micro-reality of the people living through it. We start in a tiny, freshly built wooden room that smells of balsam and pine.
We zoom all the way in.
Right into it. In this tiny hand-hewn room, a badly injured woman named Kahlan wakes up. And she doesn't just wake up, she wakes up to the sound of angry men shouting outside the door.
And the text pulls zero punches in describing her physical state.
Oh, it's brutal.
It's agonizing. She doesn't even remember dying, but she dimly recalls whispers that her heart had stopped and that a man had literally breathed his own life back into her lungs.
The pain she is in is just visceral and immediate. She's been brutally beaten by a mob. She has broken ribs, a spitted arm, swollen, discolored flesh everywhere.
Her breathing is described as feeling like double-edged daggers skewered between her ribs. Every inhalation is a battle against her own battered anatomy.
Oh, wow.
But the most devastating detail isn't the broken bones, it's internal. She is haunted by the realization that during this brutal, senseless attack, she lost her unborn child.
It's just a crushing physical and emotional trauma. And the man caring for her in this tiny room is her husband, Richard. Now, for context, Richard isn't just some woodsman.
Far from it.
He is the Lord Rahl. He's the leader of the vast Dahan Empire, a powerful war wizard, and essentially the supreme commander of all the free forces opposing the Imperial Order.
Yet here he is, acting as a humble healer. He built this small wooden shelter with precise, careful axe cuts just to protect her from the elements.
He's measuring out pain-dulling herbs meticulously.
Yeah, and even carved a beautiful wooden bird in flight into the log wall for her to look at while she recovers.
That bird is such a striking detail.
It really is. The text notes that it symbolizes freedom, the inherent right to soar on your own wings, unburdened by the demands of others.
It's this quiet, intimate piece of art that stands in stark, chilling contrast to the screaming mob outside the blanket that serves as their door.
And that mob outside is crucial to understanding the core conflict of this entire deep dive. These aren't invading Imperial Order soldiers from the old world.
Right, that's the crazy part.
These are local Westland men Richard actually grew up with. Guys named Albert, Lester, Tommy Lancaster.
The people he knows by name.
Exactly. And they are demanding Richard leave. But listen to how they demand it. That is where the real horror lies.
Yeah, tell them what they say.
They are parroting the Imperial Order's philosophy, word for word, even though they are technically free men of Westland. They stand out there in the cold, claiming that all of mankind is a wretched, undeserving lot.
They say Richard is sinful and arrogant for marrying the woman he loves, claiming his happiness is an insult to the suffering of the world.
They literally argue that the Imperial Order teaches fairness and decency by wanting everyone to be treated equally in their wretchedness.
The ideological infection has just totally outpaced the physical army. The Imperial Order's troops haven't even reached this far north.
Yeah.
But their doctrine has already conquered these men's minds.
These locals actually desire the Order's ready-made answers. Because servitude is simple.
Right.
It requires no thought, no personal responsibility, just submission to the collective misery. So Richard is faced with a mob threatening to burn his carefully built shelter down.
And we expect him to draw his sword. I mean, he's a war wizard. His bodyguard, Kara, a fierce Mord Sith, is standing right there, literally begging to be let loose to slaughter them.
But Richard makes a highly controversial, baffling decision. He chooses to withdraw. He tells Kahlan he's had a vision.
Though, as Kahlan quickly realizes when she watches him process this, it's not some magical prophetic vision granted by the spirits.
No, it's a rational realization, a cold, logical conclusion based on everything he has observed about human nature.
Richard delivers this profound philosophical monologue to Kahlan while he's strapping on his black war wizard outfit. He refuses to lead the Terran Empire into war right now.
He argues that forcing people to fight for freedom is a massive contradiction in terms. You cannot point a sword at a man and say, be free.
He says, I've been a leader too soon. It is not I who must prove myself to the people, but the people who must now prove themselves to me.
And he anchors this entire strategy in a deeply objectivist-leaning worldview. He states, the only sovereign I can allow to rule me is reason. The first law of reason is this. What exists, exists. What is.
Bedrock logic. A is A. He says reason is a choice. It is mankind's basic tool of survival, and if we evade the effort of thinking, we inevitably fall into the abyss.
This realization stems directly from the trauma he experienced in Anderith. The text explains that Richard had offered the people of Anderith a choice.
He didn't conquer them.
Right. He allowed them to hold a vote, giving them the democratic power to either join his alliance of free nations or willingly side with the Imperial Order.
And they chose the order. The majority of the people, manipulated by propaganda and this desire for someone else to solve their problems, democratically voted to be subjugated.
They voted to hand their grain, their wealth, and their freedom over to a tyrant.
That rejection just fundamentally broke Richard's faith in leading people who do not value their own lives. He realizes that if he throws his massive armies at the order right now, when the people themselves don't understand the value of liberty, his forces will be destroyed.
Millions will die for nothing because you cannot defend a people who actively want to surrender. He believes if he fights now, the world will fall into a 1,000-year dark age.
Okay, hold on. I have to genuinely challenge Richard's strategy here because as a reader, as someone looking at the geopolitical reality of this map, it feels agonizingly irresponsible.
From a military standpoint, absolutely.
Richard is the Lord Rahl. He has hundreds of thousands of highly trained troops. By walking away, by hiding in the woods, because the people of one nation voted wrong, isn't he essentially throwing a philosophical temper tantrum? Millions of innocent people are going to get slaughtered while he sits back and waits for them to prove themselves. Kahlan is horrified by this.
She's the mother confessor. She feels a deep, magical, and moral responsibility for these people. She points out that standing aside means letting the order butcher innocent families.
Right, so it looks like a total dereliction of duty on the surface.
It does. But Richard is arguing that those people have already surrendered their minds. The physical slaughter is just the inevitable consequence of their philosophical surrender.
So the damage is already done.
Exactly. He says, I must be selfish. Life is far too precious to be casually squandered on useless causes. He isn't throwing a tantrum. He is practicing extreme triage.
It's a dark way to look at it.
He believes that people will only fight the dark age of subjugation if they first experience it, realize what they threw away, and decide to act in their own self-interest.
Okay, put yourself in Richard's shoes for a second. Your people just voted to be subjugated. Do you draw your sword and force them to be free, or do you walk away? It makes me think of an analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine a teacher who has an incredibly stubborn student. The student refuses to do the reading, refuses to learn the formulas, and just demands that the teacher give them the answers to the test.
We've all seen that student.
Right. Finally, the teacher refuses. By stepping back and letting the student fail the final exam, the teacher forces them to experience the crushing consequence of their own laziness, hoping it sparks a genuine desire to actually learn how to think.
That's the exact dynamic, but Richard is executing it on a geopolitical scale. He is letting the world suffer the unvarnished horrors of the Imperial Order, so they learn, through blood and agony, to value the liberty they so casually voted away.
But the cost of that lesson, I mean, if Richard's strategy is to let the people experience the true horror of the Imperial Order before they fight back, we have to look closely at what that horror actually entails.
And the reality of it literally comes knocking at their carriage door.
Richard, Kara, and Kahlan flee the encampment in a horse-drawn carriage. Kahlan is heavily medicated, strapped into a litter inside the carriage to keep her broken ribs from shifting, and she wakes up to a metallic clang.
The carriage lurches to a halt in the dark woods.
This scene is pure terror. Kahlan is wrapped tight in a blanket, completely unable to move her arms. Now remember, Kahlan is a confessor. Normally, her magic allows her to essentially override a person's free will with a single touch, binding them in absolute slavish devotion to her.
She is a devastatingly dangerous woman in normal circumstances.
But right now, she is physically trapped by the blanket Richard tucked around her for safety. She can't even get her hand free to touch her attacker.
And a face pops up over the rail of the carriage. It's Tommy Lancaster, one of the local men from the mob.
He's toothless, filthy, smelling of sweat and malice, and he's holding a rusty chipped knife. He smiles this wicked grin and literally tells her he's going to cut her throat just to teach Richard a lesson about arrogance.
It is the ultimate manifestation of vulnerability. She is staring at this rusty blade coming for her exposed neck, knowing she has the power to stop him, but lacks the physical mobility to deploy it.
And just as the blade is about to strike, Tommy shrieks. Kara, the Mord Sith, intervenes. And this isn't just a quick rescue. This is where the text forces us to look at the brutal mechanics of defense and vengeance.
Kara uses her signature weapon, the Agile. To understand this scene, you have to understand how horrifying the Agile is.
It looks innocuous, right? Just a red leather rod worn on a chain.
Yeah, but it functions through the ambient magic of the wielder's bond to the Lord Rahl. It doesn't just bludgeon, it inflicts unimaginable, nerve-shattering pain that bypasses physical resistance.
Wow.
Kara presses this leather rod into Tommy's back. She systematically drags it up his spine, and the text describes the sharp, wet crack of every single rib breaking like dry tree branches.
Ugh, savage. She drops him to his knees, his mouth filling with blood from punctured lungs, and then she presses the Agile to his throat. She doesn't kill him quickly.
No, she lets him slowly, agonizingly choke on his own blood in the dirt. It's a sadistic, prolonged execution. Kara wants him to suffer intensely for daring to terrify Kahlan.
This deeply personal, torturous vengeance stands in stark contrast to what Richard is doing at the exact same moment out in the trees.
Right. Kara tells Kahlan that Richard drew the rest of the mob, about 24 armed men, into the dark woods. He used his black clothing as camouflage.
He dismounted them from their horses, disoriented them in the dark, and then systematically slaughtered them with his sword.
24 men, dead in a matter of minutes.
When Richard returns to the carriage, his sword is dripping. But look at his justification. He feels absolutely no remorse for butchering men he grew up with.
He tells Kahlan, "Their willful ignorance does not entitle them to my blood or life. They pick their own path. For once, they paid the price."
Cold, efficient, unapologetic slaughter. Kara tortures for vengeance. Richard kills with absolute detached efficiency for survival. He refuses to view their ignorance as an excuse for their violence.
And right after this bloodbath, as they make camp, Captain Myford arrives. He's a high-ranking D'Haran officer who has been desperately tracking Richard. And he brings the official military report from the south.
The report is grim, validating all of Richard's fears about Andereth. The Imperial Order has fully conquered the nation. Jagang has set up his military headquarters in the capital city of Fairfield.
The Andereth army, which surrendered peacefully after the vote, expecting to be treated with dignity, was summarily put to death.
Tens of thousands of men disarmed and slaughtered. The Order is now aggressively pacifying the rest of the countryside, stripping the wealth and food to feed their massive war machine.
And there's a fascinating, deeply important ritual that happens when Myford arrives at the campfire. Before he even gives the report, he drops to his knees and Kara joins him. Together, they recite the devotion.
They chant, "Master Rahl, guide us. Master Rahl, teach us. Master Rahl, protect us. In your light we thrive. In your mercy we are sheltered. In your wisdom we are humbled. We live only to serve. Our lives are yours."
Now, to a modern listener, that sounds like horrific
Oh,
brainwashing.
completely. It sounds like a cult.
But this raises a vital point about the mechanics of the magic system in this world. This devotion isn't just blind political worship, it is the verbalization of an ancient, complex magical bond.
This bond to the Lord Rahl acts as an invisible psychic shield. It protects the minds of the Deharan people from Emperor Jagang because Jagang is a dreamwalker.
Which is a terrifying concept.
I find the concept of the dreamwalker terrifying. Think of the magical bond to Richard like a psychological firewall on a computer network.
Right.
Just as a sensitive database needs a firewall to keep malicious hackers from infiltrating and taking over the system,
Right.
the Dangas need this philosophical and magical loyalty to Richard to keep Jagang out. If you aren't bonded to Richard, Jagang can literally slip into your mind while you sleep.
He can read your thoughts, he can hijack your nervous system, he can torture you from 1,000 miles away.
He can force your body to commit atrocities while you watch from the inside.
The devotion is the password that keeps the firewall active. And Meifert shares a deeply personal, somewhat tragic insight with Kahlan and Kara by the fire. He admits that he used to serve Darken Rahl, Richard's cruel, tyrannical father.
He said it takes something precious out of you to kill people who never meant you any harm. He knows what it is to be a monster following orders.
But fighting for Richard feels entirely different to him. He realizes that Richard fights to defend, to protect the inherent value of life, rather than to conquer and subjugate.
This brings up a really tough philosophical knot. Consider the emotional toll of warfare as it's presented by Meifert. If the Imperial Order's soldiers are just following a philosophy of self-sacrifice,
If they genuinely believe,
Yeah.
however misguidedly, that their cause is for the greater good of all mankind.
exactly, does that absolve them of the atrocities they commit? Because Meifert's report highlights the presence of a terrifying sorceress who is pacifying Khans for the Order, and she firmly believes she is doing the righteous moral thing.
This question of intent versus action transitions us perfectly into the heart of the enemy's camp in Fairfield and introduces us to arguably the most complex character in the text, Nietzsche.
Known to the terrified populace as Death's Mistress.
We shift perspective entirely to Nietzsche, and her physical description is arresting. She is breathtakingly beautiful. She has long, thick blonde hair and piercing blue eyes.
But she wears a fine, stark black dress that tightly hugs her figure, and she has a heavy gold ring pierced straight through her lower lip.
That gold ring is not a fashion statement. It is a profound symbol of subjugation. It marks her publicly as Emperor Jagang's personal slave.
Even though she wields world-altering magic, in the hierarchy of the Order, she is considered something lower even than the starving peasants she is terrorizing.
Yet she wears her immense beauty, her deadly power, and her humiliating enslavement with complete, chilling indifference.
We see this indifference tested immediately. She is standing in a conquered town square. The local peasants are terrified, huddled together. 2,000 heavily armed Imperial Order soldiers are bristling behind her.
She is giving a speech demanding the peasants surrender all their winter food stores and personal wealth for the greater good of the Order's army.
And suddenly, right in the middle of her sentence, Jagang mentally tortures her through their Dreamwalker link.
The text describes the internal attack vividly. It's a blinding, crippling pain. Jagang drives the sensation of a rusty, barbed lance up through her insides.
He doesn't do this because she made a mistake, right?
No, he does it simply because he's bored. And he wants her to make a brutal example of someone in the crowd to teach them a lesson about obedience.
But what is truly disturbing is Nietzsche's reaction to this violation. She doesn't scream, she doesn't fight back, she lets the agonizing pain wash through her as if it were just bad weather.
She is entirely detached from her own physical form. She views her body's existence in this world as an unavoidable torment, and she firmly believes the afterlife will be exactly the same.
To Nietzsche, existence and torment are just two sides of the identical coin of reality. Jagang threatens to do something unspeakably terrible to her when she returns to his tent, and she basically mentally replies, "Go ahead, I don't care."
And this frustrates Jagang infinitely. He is a man who thrives on breaking people, on eliciting fear.
The text notes that she is a fawn among wolves, safe in her thick coat of indifference. She doesn't run from the wolves, which captivates and enrages him.
Because she won't react to his mental torture, Jagang forces the issue physically. Commander Kadar Kardif, a massive, heavily scarred war hero of the Order.
And notably, one of the men Jagang regularly allows to abuse Nietzsche in his tents.
Exactly. Kardif steps forward. He demands she stop giving the peasants boring civic lessons and start killing them. He specifically points to a little girl in the crowd with big, innocent eyes and tells Nietzsche to make a bloody example of her.
But Nietzsche rarely does what anyone expects. She doesn't blast the girl with magic. Instead, she grabs the little girl by a leather strap that's tied around her neck, drags her over to a public wash tub, and aggressively, painfully scrubs the girl raw with harsh lye soup.
She is practically drowning the child to wash her hair, scrubbing until the girl's scalp bleeds to rid her of lice.
On the surface, it seems incredibly cruel and bizarre. But if we dive into Nietzsche's twisted, broken psychology, it makes a sick kind of sense.
She remembers being sent by her mother into filthy slums as a child and getting lice herself. She yells at the terrified girl, "You are better than to be filthy with lice."
It's a severely distorted attempt to enforce cleanliness and a sense of self-worth through violence. She is furious that the girl accepts her own filth.
But Commander Cardiff is furious for a different reason. He is insulted that she hasn't mutilated the girl as ordered. He yells at her, embarrassed in front of his men, and orders his soldiers to seize Nietzsche.
And this is when Nietzsche simply unleashes hell. She uses a devastating mix of additive and subtractive magic.
We need to define those terms to understand the sheer force of what happens next. Additive magic is the magic of creation, adding fire, adding light, adding kinetic force to the world. Most magic users in this world only have the gift of additive magic.
But subtractive magic is the magic of the underworld. It is the magic of unmaking. It doesn't burn you. It literally erases your existence from reality.
Having both makes Nietzsche exceptionally rare and nearly unstoppable.
The imagery Goodkind uses here is shocking. The soldiers charge her. She doesn't even flinch. She blows a melon-sized hole straight through the chest of the first soldier. She obliterates the shoulder and arm of a second. She cuts the third man cleanly in two, and she completely vaporizes the head of a fourth.
He is an absolute weapon of mass destruction, and she does it all while standing perfectly still.
And she issues her commands with a perfectly calm, gentle voice. The remaining soldiers are paralyzed with fear. She forces them to strip Commander Cardiff, their own war hero, completely naked.
She makes them bind him to the iron roasting pole that the town used to cook pigs for festivals, and she orders them to roast him alive over the roaring fire pit.
She roasts a high-ranking officer of her own army, just to prove a point to the peasants about how ruthless the Imperial Order can be if they don't comply.
And while Cardiff is screaming, while his flesh is blistering and his fat is literally melting into the fire, Nietzsche just stands there perfectly straight, watching him cook.
And amidst the screams, she locks eyes with the little girl she just aggressively scrubbed. The girl, who earlier had a kind of innocent, ignorant wonder in her eyes, now looks at Nietzsche with breathtaking, pure hatred.
And Nietzsche absorbs that hatred. The text says she takes the full physical blow of the girl's bright new hatred because it gives her the rare sensation of actually feeling something. The hatred validates her existence.
It's a staggering psychological portrait. It forces us to ask, how do we categorize a character like this?
Yeah.
Because she defies traditional archetypes.
She certainly isn't a hero, given that she just roasted a man alive to terrorize a town into giving up their winter food.
Right. But I think we have to throw out the idea of calling Nietzsche a standard fantasy villain, too. A standard villain wants power or wealth or revenge. Nietzsche wants none of those things.
She is simultaneously a victim of the ultimate permanent violation, a sadistic warlord permanently living inside her mind, and a perpetrator of unspeakable cruelty.
Think of Nietzsche like a black hole. A black hole is a collapsed star that was once bright, but it has been crushed so densely by its own gravity that now not even light or empathy can escape its pull. She just violently consumes and spaghettifies whatever gets near her.
That's a great way to put it.
She destroys Cardiff because he is a cruel, rapacious man, yet she uses maximum cruelty to achieve it. She is the ultimate instrument of the Order, yet she clearly despises the men of the Order.
That black hole analogy is incredibly fitting. She is completely hollowed out, dense with dark gravity. And to understand how a woman with such a profound gift for magic, a woman who started out as a bright star, became this empty shell of pain, the source text takes us on a deep dive into her harrowing childhood.
We get her full backstory, and I warn you, it is genuinely infuriating to read. It's a masterclass in the poison of enforced altruism and emotional manipulation.
Nietzsche was born to a very wealthy, noble family. Her father was a master armorer. The text paints him as a man of deep precision, pride, and quiet dignity. His blue eyes sparked with the love of creating high-quality, double-stamped armor that kept soldiers alive.
He employed hundreds of people, he paid the best wages in the city, and kings traveled from afar specifically to buy his work. He was a creator of immense value, the very engine of his community.
But her mother...
Wow. Yeah, her mother is the ideological inverse of everything her father stands for. She's a zealot. She believes that wealth is inherently evil, that all humans are wretched sinners by default, and that extreme self-sacrifice is the absolute only path to salvation.
She regularly humiliates the father at his own dinner table in front of his child. She extorts massive charitable donations from him, demanding 500 gold crowns at a time, which is a staggering sum just to soothe her own conscience and to show off to her friends and her so-called fellowship.
The mother weaponizes morality for absolute control. She essentially tells Nietzsche that her father is an evil, heartless monster, simply because he focuses on running a successful business rather than giving everything he owns away to strangers.
She tells her young daughter, "You have beautiful eyes, but you do not yet see with them. All people are miserable wretches. The Creator brought you into the world for no reason but to ease the misery of others."
And she backs up these words with actions. She forces Nietzsche, a little girl, to dress up in fancy, expensive clothes and go out into the most dangerous, filthy slums of the city to hand out bread. She wants Nietzsche to be seen doing good.
Which inevitably leads to the alleyway assault. Nietzsche is pulled into a dark alley by a grown beggar. He violently gropes her, punches her hard in the stomach, steals the bread she was giving him, and even steals her shoes, leaving her barefoot in the filth.
It's a traumatic event for a child.
Yeah.
And when Nietzsche runs all the way home, barefoot and crying, seeking the basic comfort and protection of her mother, what happens? Her mother slaps her viciously across the mouth. 3 times.
3 times. Her mother is enraged not at the beggar, but at Nietzsche for complaining.
She strictly forbids Nietzsche from judging the man who assaulted her. She says, "You don't know what burdens life has handed the man." And then she delivers what I think is one of the most chilling lines in the entire text.
What's that?
Thinking is a vile acid that corrodes faith. It is your duty to believe, not think.
It's a devastating moment of psychological abuse. By demanding that Nietzsche never judge the beggar who assaulted her, the mother essentially demands the complete erasure of Nietzsche's own boundaries, her right to bodily autonomy, and her self-worth.
She programs Nietzsche to believe that having standards, having judgment, or defending herself is a sin against the Creator.
It's like installing a highly destructive computer virus directly into the operating system of a child's developing mind.
Exactly. The mother installs this virus that says, your existence is inherently bad unless you are actively suffering for others. And this virus corrupts every single action Nietzsche takes from that day forward. It turns her genuine, childlike desire to be a good person into an unstoppable mechanism for self-destruction.
Which culminates in Nietzsche actively destroying the one person who actually loves her, her father. Brainwashed by her mother and the shadowy leader of this fellowship, a terrifyingly charismatic man named Brother Nerev, Nietzsche confronts her father at dinner.
She uses the exact manipulative rhetoric her mother taught her, guilting and shaming her father into hiring a useless, lazy man with a bad back who happens to have 10 children.
She fires these philosophical questions at him like arrows. Must you always frame everything in terms of what you need? Are you so rich that all your gold has blinded your eyes?
And it breaks him. You can literally see the light go out of his eyes in the text, because he realizes his daughter, his precious child whom he loves deeply, has fully adopted his wife's cruel, value-destroying philosophy. He gives in. He hires the man.
We have to look closely at this Fellowship of Order led by Brother Nerev, because this small local group is the actual genesis of the Imperial Order that is currently conquering the world map.
Right. Nerev preaches that man has no right to exist for his own sake. The good of the people supersedes the individual. He promises a day when the hot flames of change will sweep across the land, burning away the old to allow a new order to grow.
It's a philosophy presented as extreme compassion, wrapping itself in the language of caring for the poor, but the mechanics of how it operates actually breed entitlement and deep resentment.
It demands that the competent permanently sacrifice themselves for the incompetent. And we see exactly how that plays out economically in the text, leading us to the final collision of philosophies.
Because of her magical ability, a sister of the light named Sister Alessandra eventually arrives at the house to take Nietzsche away to the Palace of the Prophets for training.
As Nietzsche leaves her home forever, she shares one final, desperate look of connection with her father before the heavy wooden doors close.
She doesn't see him again until 27 years later at his funeral. He died a broken, impoverished man.
And the text explains the grim fate of his once massive, lifelong armory business. After Nietzsche left, under the complete control of Nietzsche's mother and Brother Nerev's fellowship, they decided to put the needy to work.
They dropped the strict quality standards. They stopped double stamping and proofing the armor because it took too much effort and the new unskilled workers couldn't do it.
They raise the prices of the armor to pay exorbitant wages to these useless workers based on their needs rather than their output.
Let's trace the microeconomics of what happens when you divorce reward from competence. When you reward need instead of skill, the most incompetent workers drain the resources of the competent. The unproofed armor fails in the field. Soldiers die because the steel is weak.
The armory's pristine reputation tanks. The kings and generals stop buying from them. The revenue dries up entirely, but the workers still demand their high wages because their needs haven't changed.
The entire system collapses under the weight of unearned demands. Within 6 months of the father dying, the business completely failed. The vast fortune he had built over a lifetime of hard work was gone, consumed by the fellowship.
I have to ask you to consider the ultimate failure of this armory business because it feels like the author's central thesis. Is this the text's ultimate argument? That a society running purely on guilt, forced altruism, and the abandonment of objective standards will inevitably collapse because it inherently consumes value faster than it creates it.
It certainly functions as a perfect microcosm for the macro conflict of the war. The Imperial Order consumes, it does not create. It loots conquered cities to feed its army, but it builds nothing.
And Nietzsche internalizes all of this dysfunction. She believes she is inherently evil because she is superior. She has powerful magic, she's intelligent, she's beautiful. All of these traits contradict the doctrine of universal wretchedness she was raised on.
But then, during her training at the Palace of the Prophets, she meets Richard Rahl. And Richard is the exact polar opposite of everything she has been taught.
The text details her vivid memory of Richard arriving at the palace. He didn't come willingly, he was brought as a captive. The Sisters of the Light put a ratahan around his neck.
Let's quickly explain the ratahan. It's a magical metal collar used to control men who have the gift of magic. It prevents them from accessing their power without permission, and the sisters use it to inflict pain to force compliance. It is literal enslavement disguised as guidance.
Exactly. But instead of submitting to this guidance, instead of bowing his head and accepting his wretchedness, Richard steps into the center of a room filled with hundreds of powerful sorceresses and effectively declares war on them.
It is an incredible cinematic visual. He rolls up his sleeve, draws his sword, the legendary sword of truth slices his own arm, and offers a blood oath.
He looks at these powerful women who claim to serve the Creator, and he boldly declares that because they use a collar to enslave him, because they steal his free will, they are acting as disciples of the Keeper of the Underworld.
Nietzsche is spellbound by him in this memory. Why? Because Richard views his abilities, his life, and his freedom as inherently, undeniably valuable. He refuses to apologize for existing. He refuses to feel guilty for his strength or his magic.
Think of Richard in that room like a lightning rod in a raging storm. While all the sisters, and Nietzsche herself, are constantly bending to this ideological wind of subjugation, duty, and self-sacrifice, Richard stands perfectly rigid.
He grounds himself in the reality of his own existence. He is living proof that her mother's virus is a lie.
And this powerful memory bridges us back to the present day. Nietzsche is back in Jegang's chaotic war camp outside the conquered city of Fairfield, and she learns a vital, secret piece of information from a group of captive sisters of the Light Sister Georgia and Sister Aubrey.
She finally learns why Jegang's mental link to her occasionally drops.
Right. The sisters reveal that their former leader, Prelate Anne, had snuck into the camp and tried to rescue them. Anne told them that if they willingly swore loyalty to Richard Rahl, the ancient magic of that bond, the psychological firewall we talked about earlier, would protect their minds from the Dreamwalker. They could be free.
But the profound hypocrisy revealed here is staggering. These Sisters of the Light, who spent their entire lives claiming to serve the good and relieve suffering, actually betrayed their own prelate. They turned Anne in to Jagang's guards.
Because they were absolutely terrified of freedom. They literally say to Nietzsche, "We know our place is to serve."
They actually preferred the familiar, degrading subjugation of slavery under a monster like Jagang over the terrifying individual responsibility of freedom under Richard.
Nietzsche sees this hypocrisy with perfect clarity. She looks at them with disgust and calls them witches of the light. And in that moment, she realizes something profound about herself.
The only reason she is occasionally free of Jagang's mind, the only reason the link drops, is because deep down, despite her conscious, indoctrinated hatred of Richard, some subconscious part of her has recognized his truth.
Some uncorrupted part of her soul has formed a nascent bond with him.
Okay, let's take a breath and unpack this entire deep dive, summarizing our core takeaways, because we have covered massive, heavy ground today.
We've seen that the physical war tearing across this map, The armies of Dahara and the Imperial Order, the slaughter of the surrendered troops in Andereth, the explosive magical combat in the town squares is merely a symptom.
The true battlefield is philosophical. It is the fundamental, inescapable choice between Richard's incredibly difficult path of individual reason, personal responsibility, and liberty versus the seductive, soul-crushing comfort of Jagang and Nietzsche's doctrine of enforced servitude and self-sacrifice.
We've seen how Richard chooses to withdraw his armies, refusing to point a sword at his own people to force them to be free, demanding instead that they learn to value their own lives.
And we've seen the horrifying, inevitable consequences of what happens when people surrender their minds to the collective. We see it in Nietzsche's brutal, detached pacification of the old world towns, and we see it in the tragic, economic destruction of her father's armory.
The text constantly challenges us to look closely at the hidden motives behind our morality. Does our desire to help others come from a genuine place of creating value and lifting people up? Or does it come from a dark, resentful place of tearing down the competent just to soothe our own guilt?
It's heavy stuff, and it leaves us with a final provocative thought, something for you to mull over long after you finish listening today. We know now that Jegang's mental link to Nietzsche drops occasionally, likely due to the ambient magic of her subconscious growing bond to Richard's philosophy of life.
Yes, the firewall is flickering on.
So ponder this. What happens when a woman like Nietzsche, who has spent her entire life believing her own existence is a sin, who was conditioned by her mother to view thinking as a vile acid, who uses extreme pain and cruelty just to feel a tiny spark of sensation? What happens when she is suddenly entirely cut off from the mind of her tormentor?
If the voices inside her head telling her she is wretched finally go completely silent, will she discover the beautiful freedom that Richard is fighting for? Or will the deafening silence of her own mind simply drive her mad?
We like things to be visible, to be neatly categorized on a map, good or evil, broken or whole.
But in the murky, traumatized landscape of the human mind, that map is completely useless. Thank you for joining us on this intensely personalized deep dive into the source material. Keep questioning the ideologies that shape your own world. Until next time.